to step out of our agenda order to do first that which I think is most important, and that's recognizing a student member for her service to our board. Emily, could you come up? We have here, in recognition of your service, some tokens of appreciation. This plaque as well as flowers. Get you to take that. And what I'd like to do, if you can you manage both or all three? I don't know how you're gonna need help. Yeah, David, do you want to take a picture? I'll help you hold it for that. How's that? Gotcha. Thank you. So Emily, I just want to read the citation for the audience. South Burlington School District, in appreciation to Emily Camarado, you were elected by your peers to represent them on the Board of School Directors. Your active participation and positive contributions during the past 2 years are evidence that their trust was well placed. Leadership and service qualities such as yours are assets to be valued throughout one's life. We thank you for sharing them with us. We do thank you. And with that, we will go back to the order as stated before you, and we will invite any comments from the public concerning matters that are not otherwise on the agenda at this time. Are there any such comments? Yes, please introduce yourself, if you would.
Hi, my name is Kim McDowell, and I am here to advocate for families who are stuck between Act 150 and Act 129. I'm not going to pretend to understand all of it, but I am just trying to hopefully allow those families who are already invested in a community to stay invested in that community. Excuse me. I think it's pretty. I mean, I know it's naive of me to think that it's not about the bottom line, but I do want to encourage you to think about what it really is, and it's just relationships with students, with teachers, with each other, and it's about supporting the community. So I would just ask that you look at those kids who are stuck in this position. On a personal note, I do have members of my family stuck in that position. I have a young son, Max, who is a sophomore, excuse me, and he is in the system. Unfortunately, under this new program, my other son, Theodore, who's in 8th grade, is not allowed to come to South Burlington. We are Essex Junction residents. So we, like I said, are stuck. Selfishly, I would love for my children to be together, but I do want to advocate for those families who are in my boat as well. I do know on the waiting list, Theo is the only one currently with an immediate sibling at the school, but there are others, including my family, who would be coming through the ranks. So I understand when you make a decision, precedent is something you have to think about, but I think this is a finite number of people. So I'm just advocating. I've gone to the school board at Essex Junction. I'm just doing what I can to keep my family together. I happen to be a member of the South Burlington community, and it's exactly where I want my kids. It's exactly what you would want, obviously, for your kids. 2 4 kids here, case in point. So I'm just fighting for that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your concerns with us. I certainly can appreciate that this is very hard for you and your family, and will be very hard for anyone who's in a similar situation. It is very upsetting to us to be placed in this situation.
Oh, I understand.
And it's very hard for me personally to say to members of our community, we should turn to you and we should ask you to pay, in effect, for students from other communities that are not going to pay. So it's not an easy situation for the board either, and it's not just a matter of the mathematics. From my perspective, it's also a question of fairness, and that cuts in more than one direction. So I appreciate what you said, and I can only tell you that we hear you at this point. We do understand. I think it's very difficult.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments about matters that are not otherwise on the agenda? Okay, that takes us to the update on the Howard Center methadone clinic permit. David, do you want to share anything new about that?
I know that I will be updating the parents and community, parents and guardians with a letter that will go out tomorrow. An email actually will go out tomorrow. But essentially, I just want to bring people up to speed that currently our appeal is still in the running. It's still there. It's an active appeal. The date currently for the methadone clinic to open is not yet set certain. That said, they do and have expressed in a response back from my letter that they do expect to open sometime between June and August. That date, again, not specific. And I will be providing you, the school board, with some next steps around when that opens. Again, our appeal still is in play. That's an important piece for people to remember. They do have an active permit that allows them to occupy. They're making internal renovations. And so that letter will work to inform everyone broadly in our parent and guardian group. So that's all I have. I don't know if the board has any particular questions for me on that.
Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you. That takes us to our student representative report, and we're glad to hear one if you have one for us this week.
All right. One thing we wanted to share was last week, throughout the whole week, we usually we have FaceTimes that last a half an hour. Last week, since the quarter is ending tomorrow, they were extended for an hour, so students had the opportunity to work more with their teachers. A lot of freshmen, they had a it's a windmill project, so all the freshmen went and worked on their science projects, so it was a really good opportunity for them to catch up on work. And that was a student council idea, and hopefully we're going to carry that next year and have that before every quarter ends. Do you have anything else?
Sylvia?
Next week is finals week at the high school, so that's a lot of fun. Oh, really?
If either or both of you need to sneak out early tonight, we'll understand.
No, it's fine.
Good, that's even better.
The seniors got their caps and gowns today. That's exciting. Graduation's coming soon.
So graduation's on everyone's minds, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And that takes us to the superintendent's report. We've had an extensive legislative report, but if there's more you want to add to it, that would be great. I just would add about that report that I really appreciated the effort to identify the impacts on our district that was included in the written report, which was very helpful to me. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I won't go into any great detail. As you said, Rich, there's a pretty extensive kind of final legislative report, which I provided the board. In addition, as you said, there was some pieces that were specific to us, to schools, and John actually assisted me by providing the kind of the cost implications of some of those situations. I mean, I find it somewhat frustrating at times with the legislative process that perhaps it would be better if we could work, that way, legislative backwards. I feel that we did a good job reaching out to our legislative cohort and updated them on some of the various issues that were in front of them, and unfortunately, given all of the situations that were happening in Montpelier, not all of those were addressed, some of which were ones we heard of around Act 129 and Act 150 and some of those changes. Again, I think the lesson for me is that we can talk early in the session. We can do a lot early. A lot of things happen in the last one quarter of the session, and sometimes some things get thrown onto other bills which have effects that can affect the school district and education in general. So, some lessons for me is to be a little bit more mindful of the last quarter or the last eighth, perhaps. And I think there's always a major rush to try to get information or to respond, and I don't feel that that's really an effective way, but at the same time needed. So I don't know if there's specific questions that the board has on any of the legislative kind of summaries that we've provided. If there is, I'd be happy to answer them. If not,
I don't have a question, but I think you should make clear to the folks who might be watching this on RETN as far as the last bit of information you provided us as far as the final figures for what we understand the tax rates are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's in the report, but I don't know if that's been talked about, so if you could just highlight that.
yeah. So what we did as Martin indicates, we looked at some of the specific bills that were that had implications to South Burlington, and so obviously that's hard because we already have a passed budget, and so as we move forward, what are the implications going to be for us forwardly? We don't necessarily know as we look to the distant future, but certainly in the year in which we're going to be in, effective July 1, what are the implications? And so that's what this addresses. What's in front of the board is some things around school lunch. As you know, school lunch is opening up both free and reduced. They're going to subsidize reduced as well. So normally our students that are qualified for reduced would be paying that amount. Now it's going to come from, outside sources. We're not exactly sure where that money will come from, but that will be money that will be coming into the district and not from the families of those kids that qualify. Education funding change, this is H538. Some specific things in there, and I probably would, John, I don't know if you could maybe just walk us through a couple of those broad changes. I know that not everyone has, I don't think everyone has the document in front of them. Is that true? So it's kind of hard. We're going to have to be a little general for you on that, but go ahead, John.
The law states if you spend X amount of dollars over the statewide average, currently it was 25% over the statewide average, even with inflation, then every dollar you raise after that has to be $2, and $1 would go to the state education fund and one would stay here. So it's a kind of a severe penalty for spending more than the statewide average, and that was at 125% of the average spending, spending by district. Our budget for FY14 that was passed in March, we were at 117%. So we were well below that goal or that limit. The legislature has reduced the limit from 125 to 123% for the next 2 years, and then after that down to 121%. So it's another gate that would close on spending, given the fact that it wouldn't be our goal to get over that limit and have that penalty on the taxpayer. So it compresses that a little bit. Once again, in the short term, if that continues to be cut, it would affect us, but in the short term, there's no effect on our tax rate. I think the main thing that has changed in our budget books, you see, we always say estimated based on what actions of the state legislature. And we do our best to estimate what's there as far as the tax rate and spending per pupil. And we said that this education tax rate with our budget would be an increase of 8%. It actually turned out with legislative action to be 7.5%. So it's on a average house, $323,000 valuation, it's $22 less than what we published in the book. I think more significant is the fact that that's on the residential side. On commercial or non-residential properties, everything looked like it was going to go up just under 1%. And that rate goes up to 2.47%. And that's because the state legislature for the non-residential rate was set at $1.44 per 100. And then that's adjusted by our CLA. So that's a significant change. There's one last thing when we set our tuition rates for other districts, Georgia, North Hero, that kind of thing, we're doing it based on a budget that's not yet passed and estimates. So we set a rate in December for next year, for starting July 1, and then it gets adjusted after the fiscal year is over. So 18 to 20 months later, the state says, this is what you actually did, and they come through with an actual rate that you can go back and charge the sending district. The state has tightened up that rule, so if you were 3% below or 3% above an estimate, the district doesn't have to pay. It doesn't have to, they just go on your estimate. So it just kind of, I think it's a protection for the sending district a little bit. So those are the three things that could affect us, but the one that really does affect us is the taxes you'll pay, the citizens will pay after July 1 in tax bills.
Thank you, John. So that one was H265 that passed, which was the property tax piece that he last touched. The other one, this is the third one that we highlighted in the board packet, and it's S130, which is called Flexible Pathways, and it allows students in high school the opportunity to take two courses at a publicly funded higher education agency. So money's been appropriated to allow that to happen. There's some additional provisions that will unfold for students 7 through 12 starting in 2015, so it begins earlier ages to offer additional flexible pathways as well, with a specific focus of personalized learning plans. So a lot of this still is unfolding for us. We'll have to get additional clarity around what that means, how that will look. Currently, as you know, at the high school, our high school, we do have the sophomore exhibition. There's a variety of things that students are going through. That's probably much different than across the state in other areas. So we're going to be watchful. The flexible pathways discussion will be one that I'll wind into the 2020 discussion as we look at our students having equal to or additional choices as they migrate through our system. And so that's a way where we may be able to look at how we can expand but also keep costs in check as we move forward into the future. So those are a couple in that area. The other part of my report was around that I highlighted was voter information feedback. And I'll just touch on that for a second. The board will get on June 19th what we'll say is a draft report looking at some of that information. Martin, myself, and our data manager, Ray Mann, have been working to just kind of disaggregate the data to help us to understand how activity with our voters are happening over time in our different sectors. And so that's been helpful information with the main purpose to really focus targeted communication, targeted feedback, where we can really understand, how we can most inform that population. So with the obviously expected return is that it helps us to continue to be a district that's listening and responding to student needs. So I think you'll find that informative. We are also working, in addition kind of to the voter feedback, and looking at information from the city around population projections and distribution of certain locations as they look to continue to build out on some of their current studies that are in play with interim zoning. So that will be provided to the board as well.
David, can I make a suggestion? I think this legislative report, I know there's been some publications in the other paper from the county legislators, but I wonder if we should think about just putting the contents on our website and then maybe linking it to this report if anybody has an interest in delving into it a little more. And I would add the school choice legislature in here as well, even though it wasn't included in this packet. I think that's relevant to future budget conversations as well as just impact to the community.
Yeah, I think that's great. Again, these have come out. This is the final. I think it makes great sense. People may want to dig into certain things and understand them. So happy to do that.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you. Thank you, David. That takes us to item 8 on our agenda, the Schools Out financial report.
Yeah.
And the board has a report on the subject. And I don't know, John, David, do you want to do or present
Sure.
further information on that?
Let me just touch on, and there may be some specific additional questions that the board may have. Currently, as you know, Schools Out is a very, very important program to our district, in that it provides what I'm going to say is excellent after-school care and services, and it's been in existence here as an enterprise fund in our district for some years. Last year, we expanded the middle school program. Again, that was based on family interest, having, again, appropriate options for students in the middle school after school gets out. We have Schools Out programs in all 3 elementary schools and the middle school. In addition, we run a summer program, and the summer program is one that has not been in the black. It's been in the red, and so that is certainly an area of concern. We've highlighted in the past information to you, the board. My suggestion or my recommendation to the board is that we approve continuation of the Schools Out as we've so noted, that you allow me the opportunity to continue looking closer, working with the business manager and Lee Lamphere, who's with us here tonight. Welcome, Lee, our director of Schools Out program, and to really try to hone in on that. Currently, the summer program is essentially set, and so commitments and things have been made. I think to make a significant change right now would be detrimental to the population of those that we serve. But I think going forward, I very much understand the need to have all of our entities in the positive. And we, as you know, have been running a fund balance in the Schools Out program. That said, the summer program has been one that's been in a loss over history. So we'll need to look at that. But again, I think very importantly is that they've been running in very much a positive fund balance for some time. That said, the second year will emerge for the middle school, and we know that we have increased enrollment for the middle school. We have known registrants that are going to really help that in its bottom line, and obviously that will help also offset the summer program as well. Important summer school pieces, all of these after school pieces are significant in what I would say the attributes of assisting us as we educate our students. Moms and dads want to have options after school. We try to make it affordable. We try to ensure that there's some continuation of the desire of what's happening in the school, in the classroom, around looking at our ends, but in addition also keeping the cost in check so that people can afford it as well. So it's a fine balance, and I'm certainly aware of it. That would be my recommendation, on the move forward direction.
David, is that recommendation including the expansion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The 10 at each. Okay.
Correct.
What's the capacity at the middle school?
The capacity, Lee, I think we can go up to 65 there as well. Is that correct? Yeah. So the middle school could go up there as well. Our current, help me if I got that wrong, we're at what, 23 planned for next year at the middle school? 21.
And has there ever been discussion about discontinuing the summer program?
There has not. I have not had that conversation with Lee. I mean, it's possible Lee's had conversation with others, but I have not. I'm not at this point interested in doing that. I think that the move forward objective would also be looking at summer school that we offer through support services for kids that we're concerned about. There may be a need to meld those two together to provide some experiences. There may be some things we need to talk more with the city around some of the things that they're offering in the summer. We work really hard with the city, and Lee and I and Wynn have been part of trying to make sure we're not stepping on people for appropriate camp activities and things of that nature. But I do think there still is a need to look at that more closely. We're losing some federal funds on the summer school program, and so we're going to need to be mindful about how we can still provide, because again, I think very important, we all know this, is that regressive learning is a significant concern to us. We send students home, we hope that they do some things over the summer. Those that don't, we know come back, stepping back. And so this is an important area for us to try to focus on.
And there was some discussion about including nutrition services in the summer program.
The only thing around nutrition services would be to try to be mindful of serving or feeding the students that may be qualifying or that are in need or wanting to take advantage of the service of having either a breakfast or a lunch while attending the program. But again, we want to make sure that it's cost effective for us and at the same time serving an important need.
So that's not included in these financials?
When?
We made the decision today not to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So, that is a fine line. The programs are not quite long enough, for us to have that full up, and the value of the staff cost versus, the expense. And many of the students, in the past we've inquired about it, have not generally wanted to take advantage of that. They usually come with, their lunches. Again, if we expand the hours, if that was to ever happen, then I think we would have to look harder at that, as far as feeding students or providing them some of that.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, I think this is the first time I've seen that the revenue line for the middle school was subsidized by a grant this past year. Appreciate, David, the recommendation that we continue that. And the way that I would look at this is, let's give it another year and see how it shakes out. But the expectation is that there would be a consistent and sustainable level of participation to justify the ongoing middle school program. I do look at the summer program differently in that it's not an extension of the academic day. And I think, Julie, your question of really evaluating and making a deliberate decision whether there's whether the district is going to subsidize the summer program as it currently exists, or what it would take to get it to a break-even capacity. It sounds like that was a decision made at some point in the past, that the summer program would be subsidized by the elementary schools.
I definitely take responsibility for that. I have very much with Lee put all of schools out programming all in the same bucket. When I talk about schools out, it's the after-school care that's happening at all three elementaries, now the middle school, as well as the summer program. I've seen that as a service and an important component to help our community and ensure that the students are getting the best they can. I haven't broken it down, from in those different areas. I think there is an important need to make sure that each program is running, in a positive fund balance, and that's, again, part of my charge to you is to say, we definitely have all three elementaries running in a positive fund balance. We're very mindful of keeping our cost in check. It's not about making, a lot of money. It's about making sure we're breaking even. The adding of the middle school, as I said earlier, was about responding to the need. And the summer program, certainly, I have felt is really, really important to many, many families around continuity, connection to education, connection to student bodies, and in trying to really help with an important group of students not be affected by such regressive learning.
I know for some families too, it makes it very seamless going from, so if you have a 4-week summer education program and that's a morning program, and then you go from there right to the schools out summer program, it's pretty seamless for families, at least for those 4 weeks that the summer program's offered.
And I will say this, part of this has been, if you haven't been part of the Schools Out summer program, Lee and his staff run a very vibrant, exciting opportunities for our students. There's some things that are currently happening. I know John and Lee and perhaps Wynn have talked a little bit about, how can we cut down on, instead of 2 buses, can we do 1? there are some things where we can definitely, you know, continue to keep a positive experience, but perhaps, you know, do some, you know, a little closer look at expense control.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it may not be a great program. I'm just saying I think it should be a deliberate decision whether the summer program gets subsidized. And also, just to clarify for me, the current Schools Out summer program is not an academic program. My understanding is it's really childcare.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the for me, and I'll let Lee respond in a second too. For me, I would say that, you know, learning is ongoing, and any program that's attached to the school has important attributes of learning. You know, all of the qualities that we're looking for and the dispositions and the citizenry, there's a lot happening in that program as a result. Lee has definitely, through the program years in the summer, has embedded, you know, the importance of reading and making connection to literacy. So that has definitely been, you know, an emphasis of the program. To say it's, you know, it's like summer school or it's like our classroom piece, that's not true. But it really is making sure literacy comes alive. We're connecting with students. We're doing some community service stuff. You know, there's a variety of things that he's wound in. They're hiking and doing some things that are physically important for kids to feel, you know, connected and connect. I don't know, Lee, would you like to add to that? This is Lee Lamphere, by the way, our director of Schools Out.
I just want to say that we don't classify ourselves as an education program per se, but in the past 3 years we've taken significant steps to really and consciously support the district's mission, and we've taken specific aim at combating summer learning loss, specifically in the areas of reading and math, which are the two areas which are of most concern. 3 years ago, we started a summer reading initiative, which it inspired kids to read if they wanted to. If they didn't, they could just do whatever they wanted. They could play. They could engage in the child care type activities. Last year, we started a mandatory daily independent reading program where every student in our program read for at least 30 minutes. And according to a lot of studies, if you just get kids reading for 30 minutes a day throughout the course of the summer, they won't lose anything, and they'll come back right where they started, or right where they ended at the end of the school year. And we've actually taken a step further. Last year, we found that some kids were a little put off by it. Maybe 10% of our kids just didn't want to read, either they couldn't read, or their reading level wasn't where it should be, or they just didn't like to read. They wanted to play in the gym and do all sorts of fun stuff. So this year we've added a component which provides kids with 5 or 6 different reading choices every day, including book clubs, readers theater, Raz kids on the computer, so they read aloud on the computer. So we get kids who are excited about that. I mean, it's just amazing. And in addition to that, we're also doing an afternoon math program, which is pretty awesome. In addition to that, we're doing a daily STEM activity: science, technology, engineering, and math. So, and this is happening in after-school programs all over. I mean, we're not, you know, doing anything crazy here. It's really the way that the programs are going, just providing curriculum that really supports the schools that they're a part of. So, so we're not necessarily considered an education program. We're not we're not summer school, but the things that we're doing are really awesome, and kids are into it and having fun. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Lee. Let me say, David, that in combination with, or not in combination, but by comparison to our other enterprise fund, nutrition services, I think the same point can be made about this fund as is said about that fund, which is if you're gonna change the financial results, you have to understand why we're achieving the results that we're achieving. And with respect to the middle school, I think it's pretty clear. It's because of low enrollment. And I don't know what the underlying why is to that. I mean, my understanding is there's a lot of demand for these programs. Why we only had 10 students, I don't understand. But I urge you and Lee to understand that and solve that problem, because if you can get the right enrollment, this program will break even or even contribute to some surplus. Lee, do you have a further understanding of that?
Yeah. Our summer program is actually very popular, and the enrollment is through the roof. We've got, and the main reason that it is so popular is because we do great things, but also it is affordable, and we've done that pretty consciously. I mean, I really try not to raise prices unless we have to, and obviously you guys help with that decision when it comes time. Because the kids that are most affected by summer learning loss are low-income families. So we want to just, as we look at this and look at tuition increases and all sorts of cost-cutting measures, we want to really make sure that those kids are still getting the opportunities that I think we're providing them. And I also look forward to working with David and with Stuart to talk about how Schools Out can support the summer program too, because there are financial opportunities out there that could benefit our program as well as the summer school.
Well, the point that I was making related to the middle school program,
okay,
where its first year only had 10 students, and my point is simply, if we have more students, we would do better. And I don't understand why we had only 10 students. Do you know the answer to that question?
I can tell you that kids for a long time have looked forward to 6th grade as just this time when they get to go home by themselves. They're a big kid now, and Diane, I'm sure I've heard it from your kids that I'm done with this now, and now I get to move on. My next phase of my life is going home by myself, and if you've argued with a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, they win a lot of the times. So it's kind of just breaking that tradition, and we're already seeing it this year. We had our 5th grade kids visit the middle school once or twice a month just to get used to it, see what it's all about, and we've seen the enrollment double in second year, which I think is a great sign. And I'm still getting calls. I got a call this morning of someone who's interested. So I expect that to pick up throughout the course of the summer.
Well, I do want to address my own personal perspective on the summer program and keeping costs low, and what David's referred to as, I guess is the educational jargon, is progressive learning, and say that I think what you're talking about there is really important, and I hope the board will subsidize the summer program if that's what's needed, because students from families that are under stress that's the difference between whether those kids perform at grade level or not. If you look at the studies, the kids, they make it, this on the national studies. During the school year, they perform as well as students from families that are more economically advantaged, and then their loss comes in the summertime. So I think it's really important, and I'm not against subsidy by decision. I am against subsidy by mistake.
Or default.
Or default.
Yeah.
And I think, if we need to subsidize this program in order to ensure that those kids don't lose what they got during the school year, we ought to. We've got to have control of the finances.
And I think that link that you're talking about, Rich, is that, in anticipation that the summer program is going to continue to have a need for subsidization down the road, I think what I'm hearing from David and from Lee is there's a lot of creative things being done to address regressive learning, but it really isn't linked to the educational system. It's somewhat opportunistic, it's creative, it's taking advantage of, some unique attributes, but if that becomes a goal, and to me that would be further justification of subsidizing the summer program, then that's where I talk about something maybe being a little more deliberate and it being an active decision versus a fallback of some surplus in the elementary program.
I have one more question, given this is an action item. So can you just help me here? So if we're not at capacity at the middle school and your over capacity at the other schools, have you thought about the possibility of pushing your overflow to the middle school?
Well, as Lee said earlier, one of our objectives is to help with the transition of 5th to 5th to 6th. And so as Lee addressed earlier, there's been a conscious effort by his team to bring students over as the year progresses, so they're not so unfamiliar, but become more familiar through kind of the Schools Out approach and making some connection with students that are going to be migrating through. That said, definitely there are options like that, where it's possible if they do some visits, they could sign into the middle school. And again, as you know, in our transportation we do our middle school, our elementary run first, and it stops at the high middle run prior to dismissal. So there are options in transportation without, significant cost increases. But, we want to be careful too about developmentally appropriate right now, and that, and all of the things that are there. And so we've talked a little bit about it. Right now what we have is just the opportunity to do the visits. We don't have the middle school as an overflow yet. Doesn't mean we won't talk more about it, though. It's definitely something we've talked about and we'll be talking about more. Yes?
Very thorough. I just want to make a comment. I have a niece who came to live with me who was physically abused, who actually went through Lee's program both after school and summer. And I got to tell you, it was instrumental for her to have that follow-up through the summer with the same people. And the social implications were so much more important than educational things for her. And these lives that we're touching, to me, that was just for her. She was without mom and dad for a whole year. And to have those same people in her lives was just instrumental. I mean, this girl, I went to pick her up the first day from the summer program. She said, "Aunt, there's my backpack, pick it up." And she was a third grader. And she should have been able to put that stuff, but she was not capable of that stuff. And they helped with all of that stuff. And so these kids, what's being done for them is just amazing. So please consider that when you're looking at this summer program, because for those kids, it makes a world of difference. Thank you.
Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the administration's recommendation on schools out?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The recommendation is approved. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Keep up the good work. Okay. And that takes us to the retirement investment manager selection, item 9. We have a report on that as well.
We do, and I think
more information
we do have.
Should receive.
We do. Before I turn it over to John, I do want to say that there's those things that we do collaboratively with the city, and I do want to recognize John and Brenda and Julie, who were, I'm going to say, instrumental in kind of bringing this in front of us. And I think often we have been really good stewards and a good help to the city in this particular area. And I know John, Julie, and Brenda have done an awful lot of work to bring it to where it is. So I think that what you'll see in brief from John, Julie, and Brenda is some good work, well done. And I think it helps us in our financial, forward thinking to be really positive. So with that said, John.
John, please tell us. I'm going to get myself coffee while you talk.
Sure.
I'm listening.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
April of 2012, when we brought the actuary report from the retirement system to the school board, we brought 4 or 5 recommendations, and the school board said, and here's the board, we should do one immediately, and that was go for an RFP for our investment side of things. We've been with People's United for 12 years at that point, and not that they were doing a bad job at all, but we didn't know. We didn't know what was out there, and so that started the process to get an RFP together. At the same time, the city of South Burlington had a investment committee forming, and they saw a need to do the same thing. So we were able to work together on a common RFP, request for proposals for investment management, and figure out where we could be the same. In other words, we have 2 separate plans with 2 separate payment schedules and eligibility, and our plan covers many more employees, but they have different kinds of employees, police and fire, that kind of thing. So, but in the investment side, if we could get some kind of economy of scale through the investments, that's what we tried to do. Another thing we wanted to do was see what investment firms did, because there are some firms that provide investment payment of benefits, the actuary services, plan maintenance, all one-stop shopping, versus an investment manager, a custodian. There are 4 or 5 players, a third-party administrator, an actuary, other legal people. So we wanted to try to simplify it as much as possible, but get the best that's available. And so what we received 13 responses and narrowed that down to 8, and we spent a couple of weeks in the dead of winter interviewing 8 different firms who came in and gave us their best shot. And from that, we evaluated, met several times, and narrowed it down to 3. And our process was checking references on the full-service providers. One is Prudential, which the city had as their provider, versus investment managers. And going through that process, we found that the investment manager approach worked the best. So at that point, we narrowed our search down to 3 different firms. Morgan Stanley, which is local, Fiduciary from Connecticut, and SEI from Pennsylvania. And the last thing we did was came up with a number of questions and a final visit here to interview the people who actually would be working on our accounts to see what their approach would be and how much confidence we had in them. So very close on these. But in that final presentation, SEI really rose above the rest as far as the expertise of what they showed us, the expertise of the people who would be handling our accounts, and their investment approach, and the answers they gave us. And it's hard to consolidate all this information into a few paragraphs or a few minutes here, but and I did list why we recommend SEI, but they had one big point was their minimum entry point for investments was $20 million, and so our plan when we did the RFP had about $6 million in it. Unless we had joined with the city, we weren't able to access the funds that SEI provides. SEI provides the most independence of any firm we found. And they're able to, with that combined buying power of $26 or $28 million now, are able to tailor investment strategies that might be different from the city and the school. And that's important because we wanted to work with the city, but we are separate. It's a separate plan. We have separate employees, separate, I mean, the taxpayers are the same, but we want to do the best for the taxpayers. So that's, and I think I've explained it here, why SEI. I do want to say something about Peoples. They've been great over the years. We interviewed with them. Their investment people are good. But SEI has such a depth of experience and a stated strategy of managing managers of funds that seems really attractive to us at this point. So one last thing SEI does, they do payroll. So in other words, our retiree payroll monthly, they would do, and they have a subsidiary that would act as a bank. So we don't have to have a separate payroll service and a separate custodial bank. And so that the other 2 finalists did not have. And their fee is includes all that.
So John, I'm sure maybe the board may have a few questions that haven't been asked, and maybe this would be a good time.
Can you just tell me a little bit about how third-party administration works? So the future planning associates and SEI and like what that looks like?
Future Planning has been our third-party administrator since the plan started in 1974. And they helped write the plan back then, and they have pension people who monitor it for federal law changes, or that's one thing they do. They also take our information from our current payroll that retirement's based on, and take all that information and then provide benefit calculations for us, and also actually determine what a retiree will get, and we check all that. And they communicate to the bank, and the bank then pays out the funds. So third-party administrator is also, the actuary works with them too. So it's a big job, but it's separate from the investments.
And is there an ongoing role that this Bristol Financial Services plays?
No,
No.
They were just a one-time? Yeah.
Right.
no commitment to that.
So in reading the report, one thing that, oh, I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, if this is agreed to, what's the duration of the agreement?
We are able to break the contract in 30 days. So it's ongoing.
It's ongoing
until we go
for
through
30
another
days
process.
notice of termination?
Yes.
How about renegotiating terms?
That's available. That's available. We know that because we checked references, and some of our references said they did that.
And will the agreement be the same on the part of the city as on the part of the school district?
Yes. What we do is there's a separate contract for each, the city and the school. Rather than have two different lawyers looking at it, we were sending it to the Stitchell Page and Fletcher. Bob Fletcher's going to look at this if the board gives it the okay tonight. So they're separate agreements, but the terms are the same.
And then finally, who makes the investment decisions and how?
The SEI makes the decisions, and but they provide feedback on an ongoing basis, so that the way our plan is set up, names me as the trustee, the business manager is the trustee. So I would work with them and go through the board. We've talked about having, as a result of this process, having a committee here also of citizens, employees who are involved, to have more oversight. But right now it's the business office, business manager.
John, as I was reading the report, I was struck by the difference between the fee that SCI wants and the fee that People's United was charging. It's $41,000. The People's United was only charging $18,000. Why the big gap? What are we getting for all that extra money?
Well, in the People's fee, there's a 5% fee charge on top of a smaller sliding scale. So this is around 65 to 70% of our investment value with SEI. With People's, it was more like 20%. But they also charge a fee of 5% on top of that for mutual funds. People's discounted their fee for us. They reduced it by about $5,000 from what we currently have in their portfolio. So we're getting all the expertise of SEI, the closely monitoring of the markets and the various funds that we don't think we get with People's. That's
a lot of money.
Yeah, but the funds available to us are huge. And what we're really looking for is rate of return, Rich, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, if they can't produce it, we don't have to continue our contract with them.
So are they going to, are we projecting that the rate of return that they're going to earn is going to be that much better than People's United, so that we'll make up and better that additional cost that we're going to be paying SEI?
That wasn't something they promised, but that would be.
Well, you can't promise it.
Right, that would be our expectation.
That's the bottom line expectation.
Yes.
Right.
You expect that we're going to earn enough with the SEI to cover that cost, and hopefully then some.
Was there any comparison of the return on the People's funds versus the historical return on the SEI funds?
Yes,
Yes.
the people's funds we have, you know, in the last couple of years.
So what was
have
the
been really,
5-year rate of
really good.
return? Do we know that offhand? Or?
I don't remember now, but last year was 14% of the people's. It was
Do we
good.
know what SEI was for the same period?
No. One thing that SEI didn't do that other firms would do is go back. Other firms would take a theoretical and look backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But SEI didn't do that specifically for us because they could have put any theoretical together for that.
Yeah, we would have invested differently.
When we
Right.
talked to their
Return to there.
references, what did they say their returns were?
John talked about.
Oh, their returns beat market averages in the various market indexes consistently. And the three references we had were all references that had gone to SEI in the last 5 years. So they saw their investments increase quite a bit. And they beat met at least their expectations of the various cities and beat the indexes for the various asset classes.
You know, my own personal philosophy is that you want to keep your investment costs low, and the market does what it does. So I find it hard to swallow this difference. I mean, yeah, it doesn't take a much better return to give you back all that money, but it takes a better return. I don't have a lot of faith in investment advisors, personally. But that's just my flinty old Vermonter approach to things, I guess.
I mean, I think the other part of this is that, you know, still in play is the work that the finance advisory group is doing to look at, you know, our financial future, and so that this is a major component in that area. As we look to 2020 and beyond, you know, we want to make sure that we're trying to keep things in check here, and certainly some of these funds that have not, in quite a distant past, have not been paid attention to, is certainly within the last 5 years, much to the good testament to you folks, have been putting, you know, some focused attention on it. And so this is probably one of the areas that we've definitely focused in on, and I think that, you know, the work that we're seeing is definitely going to be beneficial to the return and helping us in that kind of financial stewardship forwardly. So I'm sure if there's still enough questions out there when you want additional answers, then you know, you should table the discussion and we can go back out and get some additional questions. Now, that said, I know there's some timelines here that are in play, correct, John? There's some decision timeline here that's in front of us, working collaboratively with the city. Or there's...
Well, the city's big enough they can go on their own, but sure, there's timelines. The retirees get paid the 1st of July, 1st of August. We wouldn't do anything to jeopardize any of that. So.
Right. Again, I'm not. I mean, if there are enough questions by the board, again, I'm not necessarily hearing that, but.
Yeah, can I ask one question? Brenda, can I ask you a question? Do you, obviously you sat through this process as well, did you feel that the talents and the scope that SEI brought to the table would be an advantage to the school district?
I think it would be a huge advantage. I mean, they had, you know, the depth of expertise, and I do think that they can't promise the return, but I have confidence that if you were comparing Peoples and SEI, they instill a lot more confidence than Peoples. So,
thanks.
Did the city vote on this?
Yes.
They approved it?
Yes.
Other comments? Is there a motion to approve the administration's recommendation?
So.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I would have voted no, but it won't matter, so. Okay.
Understand the concerns.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to item 10, administrative report, school district mentoring program. I
Yes.
see Susie Merrick in the audience. I'll bet she's here to tell us more about this report.
Yes.
I've read the report, it's great. Thank you.
So let me just start off, and I know Pat, and I know that you guys probably need us to move around a little bit. You want to do a little bit with this, I think? No? That's great. So while the projector is powering up, you know, your continued work as a district around making connections, positive connections with our youth continues to be important. The connections that you guys have done as school board members and reaching out and spending lunchtimes and things of that nature or attending different activities is critically important. We know that the opportunity and the need to connect with our youth is critically important. And the mentoring program is now in its second year, ending second year. Is that right, Susie?
That is
correct.
correct.
And so if you haven't had the opportunity, there is significant evidence around these connections and the benefit to our youth. And I would say reversely, the benefit to our community members who are our mentors. And so I can't thank Susie enough. Again, this is a collaborative effort between the Howard Center and the South Burlington School District. And it's, I think, had a major effect on many of our youth, and certainly and absolutely our mentors as well. So I know we have some additional folks that are going to accompany you tonight, Susie, and I'd love to have the board just be able to get an introduction when you're ready. So thank you.
So the first person who will speak will be Patrick Leduc, and Patrick is a member of our SB Mentoring Advisory.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. Thank you for having us on the agenda. My first piece will be very short. I just wanted to walk you through what we're going to do today. We're going to have a short slideshow, a little about the mentoring program, and I'm going to give you kind of a recap about who we are, what we're doing, and how we're progressing. And then Matt's going to give you a short walkthrough on the assessment, and he'll use the projector as well. So when I'm done, or when this first slideshow is done, don't move back to your chairs if you move. And then we're going to have one of our mentors speak to you about the real-life mentoring that's going on. And then we'll have an opportunity at the end for questions and any discussion you want to have. Thanks.
Look, that is just, I downloaded it from a TED Talk.
Who's that? Who's that?
Thank you. So obviously, I'm just gonna sit here if you don't mind, and I apologize in advance for reading some of my notes, but if I get too far off tangent, I'll be here for a half an hour and I'll still be talking, so you have a tight agenda, so I won't do that. You probably heard the background music, True Colors, that's very purposeful. I think Susie put that together, and it's really because the mentoring program really does help foster those true colors, those joys, those inspirations, the real people that are in our young people, and so we're really excited about that part of the program. What I'm going to do first is just kind of recap a little bit what the mentoring program is. I think you already know what it is. I saw a lot of familiar faces up there, and where we are today and where we're trying to move tomorrow. So what is South Burlington Mentoring? It's really a program where we match caring adults with young people in our K through 5th grade right now for 1 hour of child-focused time in the school, on school property, during school hours. So very focused in that realm. This mission is very simple, to just help these children find their sparks. We know that through research, that as we find these sparks and they have that time with a caring adult to foster those sparks, these young people will make better decisions in the short term and the long term in their lives. It's a very promising program. It's important to note, as David mentioned, that we are in partnership with the Howard Mental, or the Howard Center. This has been crucial to our startup. The coordinator, Susie, as you all know, is an employee of the Howard Center. Through the Howard Center, she had access to best practices, to experts in the field, a leadership program outside of this local community that helps us to be wise in what we do and be thoughtful and to learn from others. So that's been a very important part of our program. This is the second year of the South Burlington Mentoring Program. And through the incredible talents of our coordinator, the collaboration of all of the caring professionals in our schools, our generous mentors that are in the audience tonight, some of them, and the amazing young people, we've been able to grow this program into one that the entire community can be very, very proud of. In a few minutes, Matt will share with you some of the assessment data that will kind of back that statement up and give some more context on that. The first thing that South Burlington Mentoring is about fostering and supporting long-term friendships and relationships. We're in all 3 of the elementary schools in this district right now. In our inaugural year, we had 20 mentors split evenly amongst those 3 schools. In this most recent year, we started with 36 mentors, again, evenly split across the schools, and we're ending with 40 mentors, or an actual doubling beyond the first year. We're very excited about that. In the upcoming year, we're going to have 8 pairs of mentors, mentee mentors, move to the middle school. And so this is something we're really working really diligently to be prepared for. There's been a South Burlington mentoring transition team meeting all year long to prepare for that transition, so that it's thoughtful and it really takes care of the people and puts them in a position at the school where they'll still be successful and they'll have time together that's meaningful. So as a result, obviously, we'll be in 4 of the 5 schools in this district. We're also very sensitive to the growth, and I'll touch on that again in a minute, but these are relationships between people, and we have to be very thoughtful about making sure this program is sustainable. We can't grow this program because it's just really great. We want to grow it as fast as possible because eventually that will be a train wreck, and we have to be very thoughtful about that. So in this year, we're still just seeking mentors in the K through 5. There will be 8 children in the 6th grade, but will not be looking for mentors to start in the middle school. We'll still be looking for mentors in the elementary schools, and we think within where we are right now with our existing structure of our part-time coordinator, that is within our capacity without too many problems. So who are the mentors that are working with this? That's important to know. They're community members right here in our local community. They're homemakers, they're laborers, they're retired people, they're professionals. They really come from every walk of life. They fill out applications to become a mentor. They engage in a pretty intense interview process to make sure they're a good candidate. They participate in training, and they go through an extensive background check, both for the school district and for the Howard Center. So it's a fairly extensive process there. They are so committed, these mentors, that they not only meet with these young people every week for an hour, they also, let's see how often, every other month, I believe, they meet as a group to listen to each other, to share stories, what's working well, what are challenges, how did I solve that problem? With the young person I'm working with, they sometimes will have guest speakers that come in. So they're very committed to this program all the way around. As a member of the advisory board and a longtime mentor myself, I'm just ecstatic about how this program is flourishing. And Matt's going to talk to you a little more about the assessment so you can see how amazing it really is going. Before I turn over to Matt, I do want to just acknowledge a couple people that are stepping off our advisory board and thank them for their effort. Karen Dieterman and Maddie Nash are both retired and they're stepping off our board, and they were instrumental in making the program what it is today. And Carrie Austin and Sam Parizo, who are graduating from high school, were also part of our advisory board, and they're obviously moving on to other things in life. So we want to thank all of them. So in closing, as much as we are delighted about the growth of this program and how fantastic it's going, we are very committed to managing this program in a very transparent and thoughtful way so that as it continues to grow, it's done so with everybody's knowledge about how it's growing, that it's manageable, and that we're doing so that it sustains itself over time. So with that being said, Matt's going to show you some information.
This is Matt McMillan, Howard Center. Matt is a former school services staff member who was at Rick Marquette Central School, and he now plays a leadership position role at Howard Center and has an expertise in assessment. So we were really very lucky to work with him on this. Thank you.
I miss working the district still.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of the evaluation we completed on the mentoring program this year. So setting out to do the evaluation, there were two primary goals. The first was to create kind of a baseline of measurement, both to create kind of a snapshot of how the program's functioning, but then also offer the opportunity to track progress from year to year. The second was to elicit feedback from the four major stakeholder groups. Those groups are the mentees, the mentors, the mentees' family, and of course school staff and teachers. The primary methodology were confidential survey sampling. Each four of the stakeholder groups had their own survey with different questions, but the questions were all based around four content areas. And the four content areas were relationship building between the mentors and mentees, presence of social and emotional learning, communication from the program, and listening and learning. And these were chosen deliberately based on existing research that shows what benefits kids get from mentoring programs. So we're going to jump ahead to some results. So we got 13 confidential mentee surveys returned. And for those of you who do survey research, you know that never happens, that high number of return. And the first query that we made, 95% of mentees reported agreeing that they enjoyed spending time with their mentors. Obviously from that slideshow, that seems pretty evident. 87% strongly read that statement. I'll move to the next slide, Susie. On days that mentees were going to meet with their mentors, 92% of them report they felt happy, which is great. We also offered the opportunity for mentees to provide narrative responses, to share their thoughts in a more open fashion. We prompted them to share one word that describes their mentor. Some of the words that came up were awesome, kind, funny, athletic, inspiring, and of course, coolest mentor in the world. We had 29 mentor surveys returned to us. And the first prompt was about connection to the community, and 96.5% of the mentors reported that participation in this program made them feel closer and more connected to South Burlington community as a whole. The mentor perspective on whether or not the mentees benefited from some enhanced social and emotional learning participation in the program, 96.5% agreed, which is great. We also offered them the opportunity to provide more of an open narrative about their experience. The first prompt we gave is what you think would improve the program. I pulled a couple of responses. The first one is, I only hope that more community members step in to participate in this amazing program of friendship between adults and kids. It is one of the most important validating experiences of my life. So that's a real response. That's not a marketing ploy to get more mentors in. So we also took the step to survey the mentees' families. 93% of parents or guardians of mentees reported that their children talked about their mentor at home, which shows a great transferences between home and school. We also asked whether or not they thought the mentoring program had a positive impact on their child's life, and 86.7% of parents or guardians agreed. Lastly, we also surveyed the teachers and related school staff. 88.9% of teachers and staff reported that on the days that the students were meeting with their mentors, they seemed happier. We also asked whether there was any impression of increased readiness to learn when students had mentors or their meetings with their mentors. And 66% of classroom teachers reported agreeing that on days that students met with their mentors, they would return to class seeming more ready to learn. I know one of the crucial things is about school days are absolutely packed, so we also asked about whether or not this program fit during the school day, and 83.3% of classroom teachers reported agreeing that the mentoring program worked for the fit of their classroom schedule, which is really important. Lastly, we asked teachers and staff what went well. One of the responses was, my students are thriving with their mentors. They are happy, they look forward to their time together, they talk more, they learn better, and they're filled with pride. So that was just one of the responses. A lot of these responses mentioned Susie Merrick. And that's it. So that is a very brief overview. We actually have kind of a massive report, so if you'd like survey research, by all means, you can feel free to kind of dive into that.
And if that wasn't enough, Joanne Jarvis, one of the mentors in our program, has graciously offered to tell you a little bit about her experience as a mentor. And I think as she does, kind of in beautiful harmony with our program, a lot of the mentors that are here are going to stand in support of her while she's
Joanne Jarvis. I've been a mentor for 5 years, and I believe my mentee has a comment that I'm the coolest mentor in the world. I've been a mentor for 5 years. I was originally a part of Reach for the Stars, which was a South Burlington community program. The program ran out of funding, and I decided to stay kind of on my own. My original mentee moved out of the district into Addison, and so I started another friendship, which was about 3.5 years ago. And I decided that it would be more fun to be part of a group. I really enjoy the gatherings that we have monthly. I enjoy the structure of the program. And most importantly, I think it's kind of like, I used this morning as an example, it's kind of like a car show. Going to watch a car show with other people that enjoy cars. Going to meet with your fellow mentors is also just as fun. We get to talk about our experiences. The thing I enjoy is watching new mentors coming into the program, and I really like to talk to them about the transition and assure them that it takes time to build trust and what things are considered normal. South Burlington program, being part of the transition team, the educators are very receptive. I couldn't imagine this program will be a win-win for all. When my mentee was completing her survey, the question came up, how often would you like to meet with your mentor? I assumed going into the middle school, maybe it's not so cool, might be less frequent. I said to her twice a month, once a month. She looked at me and wrote down every day, LOL. It made my heart smile. I get so much joy for the program. I look forward every week to my special time. Susie Merrick is a big part of the program's success. She goes above and beyond, totally committed to its success, constantly looking for feedback from both mentees and mentors. While spending time with my mentee and helping her find her sparks, I found mine. When you help a child today, you write the history of tomorrow. Thank you.
So we are available for any questions the board may have.
And David and members of the school board, I also just wanted to point out that my supervisor from Howard Center changed her schedule, and she's actually doing a match tonight to be here, and this is Catherine Shea. So I'm really grateful to Catherine. She's been a phenomenal part of the program as well.
Are there questions or comments from members of the board?
I had a question. I don't know if I've ever heard this, but how are the students selected into the program?
Absolutely. Do you want to? That's a great question, Elizabeth. I mean, just Joanne came again this morning. We presented in front of our Tuttle Middle School staff at their staff meeting. It was a very powerful experience, and it was neat because colleagues who served on our transition team were presenting to their colleagues about the program. And I mentioned that because that question came up. And it's very important to us that we make clear to not only all of our supporters, but also to the mentors and the children, that we're building a program that serves all children. So there's no stigma attached at all to SB mentoring. As a matter of fact, last year when I went around and asked our older children, the 3rd and 4th graders, I'm going to be speaking about the program more publicly. What would you like me to say? One of our 3rd graders, who's a 4th grader this year, said, I just want people to know that I'm not in this program because I'm bad. So the kids really get it. And what I usually do to answer that question is give actual descriptions of 3 children who are really in our program. So a typical mentee in our program would be a child who on the outside has the appearance of meeting with what we might consider traditional success in our South Burlington School District. He does well on his spelling tests, he's acing the math tests, but inside, perhaps he's just falling apart from anxiety, all the pressure he puts on himself. So the perfect plan for that young man would be to step out of his classroom for an hour a week with a mentor who just thinks he's terrific and is happy to do watercolor painting with him for an hour. The second example is another young man who had a grandmother who was hospitalized and was very, very close with that grandmother. And the perfect plan was to match him with a caring mentor to add to his circle of care while one member of the circle of care had to step out for a time. So now the good news is his grandmother's fine, but he has this great friendship with a mentor, so they'll continue to meet. And the third example is a young woman who loves animals, and she would talk about animals 24/7 if her classroom teacher let her. But the classroom teacher has 25 other children in the class. And so the perfect plan is for her to step out of the classroom and meet with a mentor who's delighted to explore animals with her.
So those initial referrals, are they coming out from teachers, from guidance,
They are. But, initially, in our first year, the schools let me make a brief presentation in front of staff and ask for their help. We're looking for wonderful, wonderful children to help us build this program. And so all the ideas that all staff members, not just the classroom teachers, but our arts teachers, our instructional aides, all put names, and they went to the member of our advisory board. And then that would be, usually it was a school counselor. Karen Detterman is the advisory board member. She was a classroom teacher. And so they collected all those names, and then the child advocacy team in each of the 3 schools had the very hard task of narrowing the list down. So if I said, I've got 6 new mentors, they had the impossible task of maybe coming up with 10 names. Maddie Nash said if we didn't have limits on mentors, she could literally come up with hundreds of names of kids who would like to be part of the program. So in any event, then a really fun part of my job is to go in with all these great mentor descriptions, and then the school counselor would describe all the great kids, and we make the matches. We look for that spark between them. But what's really exciting this year is that we're having new things happen, which is that parents and guardians are starting to ask for mentors for their children, and in several cases the kids are asking themselves, and we expect that last one to grow.
Other questions or comments? Susie, can I ask about the issue of scheduling actually, how it fits in with what's going on? How do you handle that issue?
So we normally try to meet over the lunch and recess period, Rich. That's with a little wiggle room on each side, and that gives us a full hour each week. We've gotten very creative this year to make it work, because our mentors, especially mentors with demanding professional, personal life schedules themselves, can't always meet over that lunch and recess. So we sit with each client, it's a one-by-one basis, essentially. We look, if it's not working, because it's first about the match, right? So then we have to move to the schedule, and if we're not finding the time, then we start to get really creative. In one case, we have a phenomenal high school staff member who's a mentor, and in 1 week he meets with his buddy for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then the next week they're able to find that hour because he's working on that blue-gray schedule that the high school has. At Tuttle, there were a lot of questions about schedules because staff is understandably concerned about losing academic time. And we've just been really open, and we've just said to them, we get that, and we're going to look at we're going to look for the pockets of time, and we're going to think creatively. We do have to meet during the school day. That's part of the guidelines of our program and for the guidelines for the grant money that So that does limit the time, but I have a lot of faith in collaboration. And I cannot tell you how humbled I am by educators really understanding the importance of this program and their willingness to work with us.
So, is there a way, this might be a Matt question, but is there a way to, I understand this is a newly established program, but is there a way to formally measure outcomes specific to kids, like, you know, improved academics, improved social competence, you know, improved attendance maybe?
There definitely are ways. That would be the next step in an evolution of an evaluation. We can definitely talk about how we can develop some more concrete data elements too. It would require a little bit more finessing and a little bit more deeper analysis, but it definitely is possible.
Thanks.
There, CY mentoring, Julie, the mentoring program that's kind of like the Yoda mentoring program of Vermont. It's a phenomenal mentoring program. In the 4 middle schools that feed into CBU, the measurement that they do is focused on attendance just because it's the most, it's the easiest one to calculate. And some grant money looks at that too, but they really, for nationally recognized grants, really like the measurements that you're talking about. Catherine, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I can add that, I mean, a lot of the grants are asking specific, that I write for, I manage also a community-based mentoring program for the Howard Center, and I have to answer those 2 questions for grants in attendance and academics. And what we are able to do is, through the school services people that measure at the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year with the students, we look at those statistics. So that is a good question, and that is what people ask for, especially when they're giving money.
Thanks. I just want to say that, so these are a lot of my friends here, and I think that this program is mostly successful because of these people, and so thank you guys, because you're really important to what you're doing.
For the entire board, we all want to thank you, and all the mentors, those here, and those who aren't here, those who are on the board, and those who aren't on the board. And I'll just transition to our next item by saying that Susie was kind enough to send me a note in connection with my planned resignation. And my response was that I made a major commitment in my own time for the next 4 years. But when that's done, I want it. So thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thanks.
And that takes us to the subject of school board vacancy. And I think we've already taken the first step towards filling that vacancy by advertising, and who can provide us with more information about it? I'm sure somebody has more than that.
I can probably provide a little bit, and I asked Delina to give copies. Oh, I guess you guys don't have those. Of the essential work of the boards off of the VSBA website. So the process right now is that I think the other paper is running an ad that the district posted indicating the duration of the opening for 8 months. And really the criteria and the counsel that the VSBA gave is that the candidate should be over 18 and a voter in South Burlington, voter in residence in South Burlington.
I think those are essentials.
Yeah, those are the minimum requirements.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, aside from the essential work of school boards, which just briefly for the audience addresses about 6 key areas. One is creating a vision for education in the community. The second is establishing policy parameters to carry out the vision. Third is hiring a superintendent to provide leadership and to manage the district. Fourth is monitor progress toward the vision. The next one is develop and adopt a budget. And the next one is engage the community. And the last is there is a fulfillment of other legally mandated responsibilities in that the board member serves a quasi-judicial capacity and then negotiating contracts with employees. So I know this information was provided to the other paper as well. I'm not sure if it will show up, but I think the purpose of any dialogue tonight is that we have a date of June
7th, I believe.
I think it got extended to maybe the 12th for receipt of applications by interested candidates, and the board will need to make a decision kind of what other criteria we would want to look at in terms of considering somebody serving in an interim capacity. And then I know there's going to be some discussion at the board meeting on the 19th, and I guess it's open for discussion, but because we've posted already there in the statute, there was an option the board had to not fill the position, but because we posted for that, the obligation is to fill that within 30 days of you vacating the position, so it would be by the end of July. But we have asked for applicants to submit paperwork that includes kind of a resume of their experiences and responses to 4 questions that talk about interactions with the school district, experiences that might be relevant to a board seat, and I can't remember all the questions, but really just interest level and interactions with the board, and possibly some knowledge of policy governance. So with that, I guess I would open up to what other considerations my colleagues are interested in talking about.
I have a couple. But one is with respect to where we are with negotiations, that we're going through fact-finding right now. And that particular area, it would seem, well, a couple different ideas on this is, it would seem bringing in a new board member at this late date may not be a good thing for a couple reasons. First of all, it may reduce the applicant pool because, you know, I don't, is somebody going to want to come into that at this, when we're at this stage in the process? And the second, I mean, is, in other words, is it fair to a new board member? And second, I mean, is it fair to the process that we've been going through, that we've all been involved in the negotiation? So that's kind of the one part of the issue, but the other is, if we bring on a new board member, I mean, is it optional for that board member to get involved in negotiations? Can we say there's a restriction on whatever the new board member is going to be, that the new board member will not finish off this negotiation? Where do we stand on how a new board member would come in?
I don't think you can do that, Martin. I suppose if the board were serious about that, you could seek an opinion from council, but the board member has the powers of a board member. And,
right.
I think any board member that comes on board will have that responsibility, barring some hopefully unforeseeable situation like a recusal. Right. But it's up to that board member. It's unless there's a conflict of interest issue that comes up.
And I would just say that both Diane and I came onto this board at the very end of the negotiation.
In the most critical stages of the process.
And we're able to get up to speed, and I think that anyone we chose would probably be able to get up to speed in a relatively quickly manner as well.
Were you going to say something about fact finding specifically?
Well, no, not necessarily. But yeah, it's just bringing on somebody at this stage. It just seems perhaps unfair. I mean, but then again, you know, the new board member would be able to decide that one way or another.
And I think.
Okay.
I mean, I think it does. To the individual, the board member that would come on, there would be, and there can be some discussions or further questions around, given that you're significantly involved in certain things, how would you see yourself taking on, you know, a decision? If one of you were in a situation where you were being asked to make a decision without having all of the knowledge, you probably would say, I don't feel I'm comfortable at this point to make a decision, and therefore your vote represents, you know, your abstention in that matter could exist. So, I mean, I think that it's in part and play to the election process, or to your selection process, and teasing that out, or asking me to work with, you know, the individual board member on some of the sensitive longer range studies that have been going on that you've been working through.
The other thing I would add, Martin, to that thought is that there's quite an extensive paper record. That's a confidential paper record, but that documents the course of this board's negotiations so far. I think it would be very wise and very appropriate to ask a new board member to educate him or herself about that record so that they do understand the basic facts very well. And I think you can do that. It's a reasonable expectation for someone.
A second question I had is, all right, so there's 30 days that we have to figure this out. What if the board can't, I mean, it's going to be 4 board members. What if there's not a tiebreaker there? What if the board can't agree on a new board member? I mean, there's this, suppose we have to fill it in 30 days. What if that's not doable? What happens then?
It's a good question.
Well, applications are due. I mean, I think we did extend it to the 12th. The process by which will unfold it can be determined, at the 19th board meeting, and you can certainly have an additional board meeting up through the end of June, and Rich is still a viable board member to you, the board, who can act as a voting member.
And I would say, to my colleagues that I tried to give 6 weeks notice so that there would be time to do this, before the end of my term. Not that I really care to guide your hand in that selection, but if it was a situation that would otherwise be a 2-2 tie, I would certainly want to avoid that result, and I'd throw my view into the balance. So I'm perfectly open to meeting right up to the 30th.
Right. So that just is telling us that if we want to avoid that concern, which I don't know if we do, I mean, not, but then we would want to do it before.
Yeah, sure. Which we certainly could have a special meeting.
What if we don't have any applicants? How would the statute?
Yeah, well,
how would the statute, what would happen?
I think then you move to a draft. I'm only kidding.
I mean, it's certainly would the statute allow us to extend the search?
I haven't looked at that.
I don't know.
We'll have to look at that.
Yeah, there are a lot of boards that experience that, and you just keep at it until you get a board member on. And with regard to Martin's earlier question, if it's a 2-2 tie, it's like any other decision, except you don't have a non-decision option. You keep advocating and interviewing and whatever you need till it's a 3-1 or a 4-0.
We might have to sweeten that stipend pot. From zero
to zero to almost anything.
Now, one thing I thought you were going, Martin, was on the fact finding was it, and the counsel that we got from the VSBA was not to be too specific on skill sets or competencies because it might, rule out somebody, a community member who had a real legitimate interest and brought some talent to the board. But I think, if I think about some of the common areas over the past 7 years, I think analytical skills, being willing to kind of dig into some tough issues. I think, I think we've benefited from some legal background. Now, any board member who has legal background is not in a position to be the legal representative of the board, but I do think that's been helpful in a number of situations. I think, general financial acumen has been an asset. Organizational structure or management experience has been an asset. I think a passion for education, experience in social services. I mean, there's a number of board members I've served with that bring really unique talents that have added to the diversity of the board. And I don't think there's a cookie cutter, but when you mentioned fact-finding, it occurred to me that I know this board has had the experience of, being able to set up smaller working groups that really kind of dig deeper into some issues. So that willingness and ability to do that.
And I would just make a comment about the 4 of you without trying to be fawning, but I would say one reason that it's not easy for me to make this decision is that you're a great board, and you know, one of the reasons you're a great board is because you're a very diverse group of people and bring a lot of different things to the table. And I have great confidence that you will continue that with whoever you appoint. You know, that this board, in the time that I've served on it, has been smarter than any individual member. And that's because you pull together and listen to one another, and I know you'll keep doing it. So I wouldn't get too specific. I just look for somebody that wants to do it, is willing to work at it, and that person will be fine.
I think one other logistical question that we don't necessarily need to answer, but everything that we would do relative to selecting a backfill for Rich's interim position has to be done in public. So if there are multiple candidates and we want to do some kind of public interview, we'll need to set up some kind of a process for that within a regular board meeting or a special meeting that would be warned.
I don't think it's critical that you try to make a decision by the 30th of June, but it would be nice from the perspective of not having there be a gap. And I do think, you know, 5 heads are better than 4, as good as the heads are. So, you know, I think it might make sense to make a decision tonight about whether you do want to do an interview, and then that allows us to schedule it, or at least tentatively schedule it and warn it and go forward.
Well, I think at this point we asked for applications by the 12th, and it's on, or planned to be on the agenda on the 19th. So
let's see what the applications are before we set something up.
Would we invite members of the public to ask questions as part of the interview process, or would we be asking, how would that look? What would that look like in a public setting?
I mean, I think there's a statutory obligation to let members of the public kind of have their say on anything that comes before the board. I don't know if there's a statutory obligation to let them ask questions, but if you view it broadly enough.
You know, you can. It's the open meeting law. Yeah.
People have the right to
with
say
limitations.
I think yeah, the counsel I got from the VSBA was just maybe put a time limit on it.
That's right.
But if we have one application, do we need to do an interview?
Then it's kind of a formality, isn't it?
Right. So
to do an interview.
Well, in the advertisement,
maybe not.
In the advertisement, we did.
No.
Yeah, in the advertisement, we did specifically indicate that there would be some. It would be on the agenda on the 19th, and that there may be that applicants would be notified ahead of time, but that there may be an interview process at that meeting.
I mean, my recommendation, just from the side of transparency, I think it would be good, if it's only a single individual, I think it's nice to be able to have that open conversation, and as you said, solicit, you know, any other additional questions that might come from the public. You've done a good job to keep things very transparent, and this is a critical person.
And the board's been good about doing its due diligence, and as I think about it, although I was inclined to think if you had one applicant, you don't really need to. Probably the right thing to do is to talk with that person publicly. You know, let the public have it say.
So should we just make that a point of the agenda then on the 19th?
We'll put board vacancy, candidate interview.
The only concern I have about that is this: if you have a good applicant or applicants who for some reason can't be here on the 19th, I think you shouldn't make that end up being eliminating somebody.
Yeah, so you can discuss the applicant / interview. I mean,
if there are candidates who are available that night, let's do it, but let's not make a commitment that says that's the only time we would do it. That make sense? Okay. Anything else?
We should give the candidate the RETN questions, because that's really the only thing that people have to, that board applicants, candidates, I should say, have to respond.
Here in front of the television.
Yeah, so. Out of fairness.
Let's move on to another subject. Was it only the 8th reading of the policy?
I think we cut that down.
I
think we cut that down, actually. I think it could be maybe.
I think it's the 11th or 12th reading.
Well, one of them you kind of counted off. So.
Of course.
So we have a document in front of us. David, you want to say
Yes,
something about it?
I'll just, I think you talked about it a fair amount.
Yeah.
This last iteration is that we did kind of the crosswalk between, what were the changes from the initial document that was once to now the revised, and so those are represented in the different colors now, green and red. And again, Wynn has assisted in this area for me, working with Pietro on this, so I'd open up any questions that you might have about this. And Wynn, do you want to open up with any additional?
Well, I think, first of all, it was rather challenging to do that crosswalk because there are two different almost paradigms. I think there are a couple of things that emerged. The language that's in black is sometimes transcends both, but it's more topical. The content was the real area which we looked at. And I think the tenor of it, or the tone, is the green is much more factual and, I don't want to say, much more aligned with state and federal law, current state and federal law, both in definitions and in intent, and I think it's clearer. Other than that, what you see is what you get. I'm happy to answer questions about it, but you'll see additional definitions, and you'll see additional examples above and beyond what we had in the original.
Other comments, questions?
Well, I guess I had some questions in some couple places where I thought there should be some wording changes, but just making sure that there's some of the different concepts that are in here than what we've been looking at. And I guess I had one question is, it's new, say, extending this to third parties, and what does that really mean? I mean, that we're, that I guess, I mean, I understand that we want to have a policy against unlawful harassment, certainly for employees and probably separately for students, but should we be getting into when it comes to third parties? I mean, I understand we don't want our employees to be harassing third parties either, but is that our...
How far does it go?
Yeah, how far does it go, and is it sufficiently limited? I think it is, in that it talks about third parties to the extent that it can affect the educational environment, I believe.
Well, it's also third parties harassing us, so it goes both ways.
Yeah, and there's certainly a legal obligation to protect our employees from harassment by third parties, and that's an issue that comes up. I'm a little surprised to see it drafted this way, because I think this would also protect those third parties from being harassed by our employees. I think that's useful and appropriate, but I don't think it's legally required. And I do think it stretches in the direction that I urged you to go in to begin with, which is to say, this is a policy. You are required to comply with the law. One of the requirements of the law is that you have a policy that protects your employees from harassment based upon membership in a protected class. That's not to say you cannot have a broader, stronger policy, and I think you should. I would also add that, I think Pietro's done a nice job of picking up some of the more recent legal requirements that I hadn't gone back and looked at, and that's why I never tried to do the board's lawyering, because I don't put my lawyer due diligence hat on, I put my what's the right policy hat on, I try to do something like this. So even if you were to agree with my view that you should protect people from harassment for other reasons than their membership in a protected class, a lot of the green language would be appropriate.
I guess on that subject, I still am concerned about extending the policy beyond on the legal requirements. Not that I think it's okay for employees to harass in a lawful manner, but I think the reasons go back to a few things. First of all, that I get no indication from anywhere that this is this issue that we need to fix. And I think if we put new language in here, we may be adding some burdens to administrators in their supervision of employees, where claims of where it's normal supervising can be deemed or claimed to be harassing. So I'm still at this point not comfortable with extending it to a broader
third party piece.
Well, not the third party. I'm not sure about. I mean, I have to look and think a little bit more about that. But I think, yeah, I think the bottom line is I don't think we should be extending the policy more broadly. But as far as there's a couple areas though that I did have some wording changes which are a little minor, and I did have actually before that one question. The concept of designated employee, that's a different way, that's a different concept, or did I miss it in the original policy because it's been a while since?
It wasn't in the original policy.
Okay.
It's the new state law. It requires every school to have 2 designated people who receive reports. So in case one of them is a harasser, the other person has someone to go, and also recommended that if possible, one's a male, one's a female, to be able to deal with gender kinds of reports.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a human resources person, it's just a designated administrator or designated
In every school.
Okay.
2
Oh,
of
in
them.
every school?
In every school.
Every school, okay. Gotcha, okay. As far as the wording change, and this is on page 4 is the primary place, where it talks about that has the purpose or effect of objectively and substantially undermining and detracting from or interfering with an employee's or third party's educational performance. I don't think that's what we're after. I think we're after work performance. This is not something aimed at preventing.
Martin, can you point out where you're talking about?
It's at the top of page 4, and it's talking about interfering with, it's in the definition of unlawful harassment.
Oh. I can speak to that because the original model that Pietro sent covered students and staff, and so I went through and eliminated any student components, but
Okay.
I missed that one.
Okay, all right, that's fine then.
So, good catch.
And
But it still leaves you with the same question if you include third parties, because the typical standard that the law uses in the employment context for distinguishing between harassment that's legal and harassment that's illegal is that it has to be so serious that it has the effect of changing the terms and conditions of employment. So if you're talking about third parties who are not employees, you have to have some analogous standard by which to say it's got to be fairly serious. That's the idea of it. So I don't know where you go with that, but I'm sure if we...
Wouldn't it just be changed to performance?
No, a third party might not be, I mean, you gotta think about who these third parties are we're talking about, you know, in that direction.
Well, that's defined
So-
here as not students and not employees. of
Yeah,
the
so
district.
who does that mean?
Could be
So that means volunteers,
Yeah,
that means
consultants.
visitors, that
Some
means,
mentors.
yeah,
That's what you
mentors.
just talked about. Third party.
You know, so I think you have to have some sort of, you have to have some standard by which to say, you know, if I'm an employee of the school and I'm walking down the hall and I see a visitor and I say, hey, what are you doing here? You know, that maybe somebody doesn't like my tone of voice or doesn't think it's an appropriate question, but you'd say, you know, it's just not serious enough to be considered harassment.
Right, and I think, I mean, isn't that what this is getting at, that it interferes with the work performance? Are we saying for a third
Yeah,
party?
but they might not have work performance if they're a third party.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying performance because there's some purpose for
Everyone's existence, essentially,
exactly.
right?
But it's also saying purpose or access, and then it says creating an objectively intimidating, hostile, or offensive, and then it goes on to describe what that would be. So I think if you just change it to performance or access.
Yeah, it just seems performance is getting wishy-washy as well. I mean, if we're talking about unlawful harassment, it's got to be,
Maybe act.
it's got to be work performance is my understanding.
I mean, access to school resources is a good standard.
Yeah, that works.
Because then
Just take
you're
out
talking about a
education.
parent, and you're saying, is it so serious that it deprives the parent of
Well, yeah, that could
reasonable
happen.
access to the school's
Act,
resources?
education.
Probably works for volunteers. Who else? Does it work for a tradesman who's in the building, a tradesperson?
Yeah, somebody coming
I
in.
guess it,
Contracted service person.
I guess it kind of does. I mean, they're not here to access school resources, they're here to fix the ventilation
Right.
system.
But resources could be stretched a little bit, right?
I think you can accomplish this by saying, interfering with an employee's performance and third parties' access, you then differentiate between the outcomes or the they're two separate things.
Yeah, and I don't think you're I don't think you have to say employees' access to school, because that's caught up in the work performance. And I don't think you want to say just performance. I think employees' work performance or third parties' access to
Yeah.
school resources.
Gets it done.
Or, in covering everything, the objectively intimidating, hostile, or
Right.
offensive environment. And I think that,
Maybe instead of resources, it should say school or school facilities.
facilities. But there
You know,
may
a
not always be
tradesperson would have an
resources.
interest in having access to the facility to come and do their work. A parent would have an interest in having access. A volunteer would have an interest in having access to the school facilities. Even a spectator at a sporting event or a drama or a musical presentation would have that interest. I think that's the right idea. School facilities, I think.
But is it unlawful to interfere with the access to school facilities?
No,
Yeah, so I mean, that's,
not if the person's not an employee.
right.
I mean, fundamentally, this goes back to the idea that this is related to discrimination law.
Right.
So it's not illegal to discriminate against people who aren't employees, typically. There are some exceptions. There is a provision that makes it illegal to discriminate against a person's access to public facilities because of handicap. There are some public accommodations laws that relate to race. But just generally, it isn't.
Well, it seems to me that we need to do one of two things overall, and that is, if we're going to stick with what's unlawful harassment, we probably need to get rid of third parties, or we have to be all in and go with the broader, which is what
That makes sense to me, Mark.
Rich wants. But
I mean, I think in both directions it makes sense.
yeah. So
You
I
know,
mean, it's got to be one
You
or
make
the
up
other.
your mind what the policy direction is.
If we can jump to page 6, the number 9, age harassment. I don't know that sentence made sense to me. I just want to flag that. I don't know what the
Which sentence?
age harassment includes unwelcome verbal, written, or physical conduct directed at an individual's actual perceived age. Such offensive remarks about a person's age or treating someone less favorably based on age. It's just not.
Such as, I think. is what
Yeah,
we
it's.
think,
Okay, that's what it means. It just needed that word, such as. Thank you very much.
I shouldn't really speak against my point of view, though.
Well, page 7. This concept of an employee who witnesses conduct that she reasonably believes might constitute unlawful harassment. Oh wait, that's not where I wanted. Just a second. The question I have is that it's saying shall take reasonable action to stop the conduct and to prevent its recurrence.
Again, where are you, Mark?
I'm sorry, I'm at
green.
It's
First
in
line
Green
of
at the top of the
green.
page.
It's, yeah, it's, any employee. Wait, I
I
had a
don't know if
question.
that makes sense.
Well, I guess I was wondering, I mean, mandating that an employee has to take reasonable action, I don't think you can do that. I think you can encourage, should take reasonable action.
You
in a
might not even
policy.
want to encourage that. I mean, that makes the employee kind of judge of whether or not what's going on is illegal harassment, and sets them up to say, you know, have a confrontation when the right thing for them to do is report it so that it can be dealt with within the ordinary structure of the school.
Well, but if we've provided training and there's an opportunity in the moment, I mean, that's what we're encouraging our students to be doing in terms of peer interface. So I think the issue I would take is just the requirement to do that versus
whether it's shall or,
you know, may take or are encouraged to take or something like that.
Your existing policy gives you both. If you look in red above that, employees who are targets of harassment but who would prefer not to directly inform the person engaging, so on and so forth. So that gives you...
That's quite different from a third party saying, I see Wynn harassing this employee, Wynn, you stop it.
Yeah.
I don't think you really want to set that up.
Right.
You know, it's one thing for me to say, Wynn, I'm not happy with this situation, and I want you to know I think you're harassing me, but to get a third party to come in and take action, I think that's very... I don't think that's what the law requires, nor do I think that's appropriate.
But I mean, is it problematic to encourage? I mean,
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have a hierarchical structure out there. You know, you're going to encourage somebody to take on their supervisor in a direct and public confrontation.
So
I'd strike that. I mean, unless Pietro's going to tell us that that's what the current law requires, which would be news to me, it would surprise me.
We'll ask that question.
Yeah, ask them that question. Yeah. All right. The next thing I had was on page 9, which is under the investigation. It's towards the end where it's saying the school district shall take prompt and effective action as appropriate that is reasonably designed to stop the unlawful harassment. I think you need to say the alleged unlawful harassment because it's not been proved to actually be unlawful at this stage of the game.
Where are you, Martin?
Top of page 9?
It's on page 9. It's towards the, it's just above.
Middle of the first paragraph.
Yeah.
The standard used to assess conduct, it's above that, not far. It's, the district shall
Okay,
take
got it.
prompt.
Yep.
It should be alleged unlawful harassment.
I don't think so.
Really?
No, if
But
it's
this is
not
before-
actually unlawful harassment, you don't want to stop it.
District shall take prompt
Or you
effective
might not
action.
want to stop it.
Stop the
The
unlawful
school-
harassment.
I mean,
But But this is after receiving notice. The idea is after receiving notice of the alleged conduct, the school shall provide a copy of its harassment policy, blah, blah, blah. It's talking about the school district has been informed that this is alleged conduct is happening.
But it's not being investigated.
And
Well, I think your point really is that this sentence is out of place. It comes too early
I mean,
in the
it
process.
has, well, not necessarily. I mean, if there's conduct that's been alleged to be unlawful, you haven't finalized your determination if it really is unlawful or not yet. You probably should still go in and step in even before your final determination.
It's a judgment call, don't you think?
Well, yeah. So maybe it's not shall take from.
But I mean, that's the legal obligation that arises in the event you find that there is unlawful harassment. Your legal employer is obligated to take prompt and effective action to end it. And the idea is these investigations happen fast.
Okay.
The idea and the reality are not always the same.
Right.
But that's the idea.
Well, it seems like it should be fixed one way or the other. Either it has to be clear that it's occurred after a quick determination that in fact it's unlawful, or it just has to deem that it's still at that point uncertain, but there's a reasonable belief that it's unlawful.
Well, I'm going to jump back in here because I think Rich makes a point.
Yeah, just
it does
move it
look
up.
like there's been a determination that it is. So if it's said alleged, that might be okay. And I'm not saying that from a legal standpoint, because if you look at number 3, in determining whether the conduct constitutes a violation of the policy, well, if you've already convicted them in the preceding paragraph, then it's either out of chronological progression, or it needs to say alleged.
I mean, I think it should be under 5, action on a substantiated complaint.
Yeah.
That's where you
Move
put that
it.
sentence. You know,
It's,
when you
but
found
it's under the investigation section.
wrong to put it there. I think.
But it's but I guess my point is that if in fact reality is that it's going to be a week, a day, an hour, whatever, to determine that this seemingly unreasonable or unlawful conduct is in fact unlawful, you should stop it before you've gone through whatever process you have to determine whether it's unlawful or not.
There are 2 other places immediately following that where it does refer to it as alleged, even as far as number 5. Finds that the alleged conduct occurred. So in 2,
I mean, if you look at the way this actually happens in workplaces where these investigations are conducted, it's very common to say to the alleged harasser, you do not communicate with this employee until this investigation is complete. And that's probably a wise thing to do.
Right.
In many circumstances, but not always.
And I guess that's kind of what I saw.
I mean, because you get
as
delicate
getting at.
situations where, you know, you might have a situation in which the employee who feels harassed is saying, I don't want you to do that. That's going to mark me out as a troublemaker in your workplace, and you know, I just don't think you don't have to say everything in the policy. Some things can be left to good judgment, and this is what I believe. As far as interim action, I'd leave that to good judgment. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, if we don't have to put that in.
It's going to be somewhere, because that's the standard. It should be.
Well, that's, no, again, I'm talking about the interim before you've come to number 5.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't need, if you check with Pietro, if we don't need to have that language in there, then fine.
You're just striking it?
Leaving that to the good judgment, because, yeah, I mean, that is the way it would work.
Well, even if that's the case, though, I think you will find that the law requires that you take prompt and effective action upon a determination.
Right.
And that should be in the policy in the right place.
Yeah, and it is in number 5. I mean, it is number 5 on number 10. And in fact, that's redundant with the green text, I think, that's right above it. I think you need to strike the completion of investigation report number 4, the last few lines essentially are saying the same thing as you have in paragraph 5.
Yeah, well, there's definitely redundancy about investigation and process. It's in pieces of 2. Under investigation, there's pieces under 4, and there's
so that could just be
under
tightened.
5.
I think I had one last question. And confidentiality in record keeping.
What page?
This is page 11, and I meant to look at my the contract on this issue. It states, as far as investigative report shall be kept for at least 6 years after the investigation is completed. Is that consistent with the contract? I guess that the contract is just performance appraisals and such, that it's kept for 5 years. Is that right? I'm just trying. I mean,
what
in the
specific
teacher's contract, right? There's language about performance appraisals and such that there's a 5-year period. Is this somehow inconsistent? I don't think so. It's a different animal probably. And if it's 6 years is what's required by law, that's.
So the reason that they would say 6 years in the policy is because that's the outside statute of limitations.
So it's by the law, so we need it in here. But
I was thinking it was 7, but
no, 6.
6.
3 for for the personal, this is under Vermont law, 3 for emotional distress, and 6 for economic impact.
Okay.
But somebody should check it against the contract, although that.
I don't think the contract
if
speaks
the
to
contract
this.
says something different, the contract needs to be changed.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all I have. Seems like enough. Anything else? So let me suggest to you that I think the right thing to do is to make the basic policy decision that we've talked a lot about whether you want to limit the policy to what's legally required or whether you're willing to go beyond it. And if you answer that question, then Pedro can draft us a policy that complies with the law, I'm sure. So would someone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we limit this policy to what is required by law.
Second.
Is there further discussion? I'll just add that you understand that I disagree with you. I respect your point of view. I understand it. I don't agree with you. I can count. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. If I were voting, I would vote nay.
That's twice
It wouldn't be
today.
the first time
It's been a
tonight.
tough day for you.
When you're a lame duck, you know, it's just.
Let me just say, it's not that I disagree in principle. I think
Next year is the big year.
The
I
loophole.
think it's complicated. I mean, our
It is complicated.
it's putting this board in a position of having to write law, and that's what it feels like, and I just don't feel confident to do that. And we've
what
been
your
around that
policy
horn,
is.
been around that horn eight times.
Right,
Well,
and I
that's what
think
your policy is your internal
that's
law, but
meaningful.
It's enough said, it's enough said.
It's meaningful that we've had to review it
Mhm.
8 times, and that.
Well, I appreciate all of your patience.
So can I just ask one question? Are you intending to bring this back next time?
I would love it if it got done during my tenure.
Well,
I think it's a
we'll have to
question
see
of
whether Pedro can.
whether it can be done, but if it can be done, I think it would be great,
Right.
even if I might not vote for it.
Because I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to go 10 for 10.
Yeah.
I would.
That takes us to executive limitations policy monitoring 2.2 treatment of staff. Are we done with 2.2
Well,
treatment?
there's some changes that were made to be consistent.
Okay.
I did meet with Martin, and we went through it, made the changes, and again, I think this represents and reflects the direction. Again, there was I would say, a disconnect between interpretation and evidence, and I think this clarifies it by what's highlighted on page 204, which basically, under unlawful discrimination of protected classes, it signifies instead of not in policy, but it's in information which is provided to employees, which is accurate. So, and then a change on 3 of 4, which is provided in writing and orally. And those are the changes that were made.
Are there further comments or questions on this policy, on this report? Are you ready to accept it as it stands? Without objection, it's accepted as it stands, and I'll fill out the monitoring report sheet on your behalf. In a way that's consistent with it.
Do you need it?
I'll do it after the meeting. That takes us to Act 156 grant, action.
Actually, we've got, oh, no, we don't.
So, Act 156 grant, this is the transportation piece. Again, clarification around action. Last meeting, Wynn was not with us, with me. And so I did inform the board that it really just felt that it needed to be informed, although the intricacies of the document stated that you needed to have action. And so for clarification purposes, you really just need to be informed. I'd recommend that you simply have it on your agenda, and you will so note that you've been informed of the Act 156 grant activity within, I'm going to say, Chittenden County. There's no action by the board required other than the fact that we have it on the agenda and we inform you.
Accurate.
All right, we've been informed. Is there any further comment or question or any motion to be had with respect to this? Not that it's not required, but it's still possible.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, this isn't a motion, but I would just, I would be consistent in my comments that I feel like this particular grant application has still become disconnected from, in this work is I'll be interested to see what the outcome is, but I felt from the initial onset of this, it was focused on sort of what would be an inter-district collaboration that would focus on learning opportunities and you know, looking at some consolidated transportation that would allow for those enhanced learning opportunities, and it will not address that based on what I've seen here. So yeah, I'll just make that observation.
Anything else? Okay. Then that takes us on to item 15. This is a loaded agenda.
I know.
Yeah, who set this thing? Huh?
I don't know. Superintendent evaluation 2.9 communication and support to the board.
So it's on the agenda for discussion. I don't have anything to provide you tonight. I think just if there's some specific directions, I think you know, part of what you hold me accountable to is the compliance issues. Last year, I think I provided you with kind of a summation, and then there was some, you know, further dialogue that then provided me the feedback. I'm happy to go about it in any which way you wish. Again, under the policy governance process, you know, you're evaluating me on the actions and the outcomes of the district, and so I mean, I thought about providing you a whole bunch, you know, and I said, well, why don't you give me some feedback on how wish you'd like to move forward in this next.
When is the your evaluation due, David?
It's actually, I think we're beyond the date right now. Again, but you know, that's, you know, those dates are set as, you know, kind of targets from my perspective, and it's as much on me as it is on the board. It's on the agenda, and I'm understanding of the board's time and the need for some time to do this.
Would be a relatively simple matter to put together a summary of the monitoring reports.
No.
Would not be a simple.
No, it would be it would be appropriate, and I think responsive to the board's actions.
So is that one of the things you want to see?
I would think so.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Put together a compilation of the monitoring reports. Just you know, where we are.
I mean, there's a fair amount of other things that you and I have been working on. I think, you know, from relationship work to, you know, district directions, etc. I mean, I'm happy to provide. I mean, you know them, but I'm happy to provide, you know, some additional information if you'd like to, if you wanted to go beyond that a little bit. But.
Yeah, I think the other areas, there was some feedback provided from the board last year that was outside the scope of policy governance. So I guess I would be interested in sort of what your self-assessment would be on that as well, David.
Okay, that's good.
Anything else? This would be a matter to take up in a future executive session?
I think, you know, it can be done in open session.
Could be.
I'm fine with that. There may be, what I would suggest is put it back on the agenda for.
I would say this in all fairness to members of the board and to you, David. I think it's appropriate, since the law permits a personnel matter to be discussed in executive session, for the board to have some communication with you in executive session about it, and then perhaps to share the results of that process with the public.
I'm fine.
I think that'll contribute to a more direct and candid communication, and that's important.
That's good. I'm fine. I think in last year that's the way we did it. It had it on the agenda. We did some work executive session and then shared kind of a summary of information with the public.
Do you want to appoint a committee to receive David's information and do a little initial review of it and make recommendations to the rest of the board? Or do you want to just do it as a group?
I like the process we used last year.
Yeah, I thought
with
that
the
was good
full
too.
group, yeah.
Can we do it before you leave? Can we schedule it before he leaves though? Because I think it's appropriate that
Probably
he
is
be
a little
part of
hard to
it.
expect a new member to do that.
Yeah.
And we probably don't have time to do it at the 19th, given all the stuff that's currently on the agenda.
I think you're right.
Well, executive session seems to be difficult, and at least at the 1 hour. I don't know how you did tonight, but,
Maybe we can do a separate one.
or you can, yeah.
Well,
Separate
look for
a day.
a meeting in the last week of June, give David the maximum time to come up with this material.
You ought to get it so you can have it.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we were
Well
to meet
before, yeah.
the last week of June. I think I can do that. My calendar's dead, so.
On the 26th, that's a Wednesday.
Can you send us out dates?
Yes. I have
I don't
people
have
who
my
do a
calendar.
very
Meg
good
or
job.
Delina can do this.
Yes.
Oh, have practice expertise, right, Meg?
She's very quiet over there. Yeah, we can send out some, we've, third week of June kind of would be a target week. No? Yes?
Well, I think it would be a
That's
target
the
week for you to do what you're gonna do, and then the last week in June.
I mean, we're not
It's
Yeah.
probably,
far off here, that's all. I'm just,
yeah. That's why I'm saying,
yeah.
hold it to the last week and look for a date that last week, I think. I appreciate your suggesting that, Julie. I would like to participate in this. Thank you. Anything else on this? June 19 agenda. Well, we got the draft here someplace, and I know we've added board member vacancy
Back on there, yeah.
back on. Anything else that should come on or go off?
Can we take your evaluation off if we're doing that in executive session first? Because we're not going to do it before the 19th.
It's fine. I think you can, that's fine with me.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is gonna be labeled as school board interviews, because as I
No,
recall,
we
what
changed
the
that, what we
conclusion was, it was to
Review candidates.
review candidates and make decision about further process,
Yeah.
really.
It doesn't lock you in. If you wanted to
Right.
do it, you could.
And let me say this, in the event that it might work to do interviews that night, do you wanna try?
I would say yes.
So,
We will know on the 12th
yeah,
what we're
so why
doing.
don't, maybe.
Can't we just say
two
review
of you-
candidates as possible interviews? I mean,
Yeah.
That's how it was advertised, so.
Well, I'm just thinking about being ready to do that. Somebody on your behalf should review the applications and make a judgment.
Shall we
about
do
what
a,
you want to do.
want to do a
Two.
subcommittee?
Yeah.
I'll be on a subcommittee.
What
I'll do that
subcommittee
one.
is this again?
just for the reviewing the
Review the
board
applications and
vacancies.
decide whether to
Candidate.
try to set interviews for that night, because it's gotta happen.
Right.
If you're gonna do that, it's gotta happen in advance. That's agreeable? Okay.
So Elizabeth and Diane.
All right.
And how will we move forward on that? We just communication with you, Elizabeth and Diane, around, or you with us? Would you like us to try to schedule a time, or you're just
Well,
gonna
we
let?
just have to set something up after the 12th, right?
Fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else on the agenda for the 19th?
I've gone, I
We had-
requested the legal opinion on the nutritional services deficit and how to handle it from Steve Stitzel, and expect it next week.
We'll put that on.
My colleagues can bear it, I'd love to put that on.
We had a couple agenda items we had to add back on to the parking lot.
Yes. I haven't done that yet. The ones we didn't get to, what were those?
Evaluation. Oh, not evaluation,
tuition,
Tuition.
Yeah.
feedback.
Feedback, that's.
Feedback group, yeah.
Were the two we didn't get
Yeah.
to. Yeah. So feedback, process, and tuition.
That takes, let me say tuition. That
Private.
goes to the question of this, whether the board wants to
Oh,
take
yeah.
any action with respect to choice students or family of choice students. That's something you want to put on an agenda?
I think we should.
I think you should hear it too, decide it. But probably not
Well, it's,
on the 19th.
is it about choice or is it about tuition?
Well, there are two different subjects in my mind. I mean, there is the question that was raised by the staff member who came tonight and said, you know, would you allow my choice student's sibling to come to your school? And then there's the subject of tuition students, which is a different subject, really.
Well, there's a couple things at play. Remember, when we set our cap limit, you could certainly revisit your cap to increase your cap, but that isn't going to get at the same, some of those students, maybe some, unless if you opened it all the way up. The other piece is, you know, we currently don't have a tuition paying policy. That was taken out 8 years ago or so. So that could be another area where you could have a tuition paying policy for.
Well, is that even if the other school board agrees to pay?
Correct, because they're going to pay tuition, but if we don't have a policy to accept their
Right.
tuition, then.
So
Or parents can pay.
Right,
Right.
but right
So-
now.
So let me
we
just
don't have
give the board members who weren't here, and I think only Elizabeth was here, the background on that, which was this. At one time, we did accept private students on a tuition basis. We were advised by council that if we did that, that might mean that we could not discriminate based upon a student's status with respect to learning disabilities. So that might mean that if you accepted a student for a tuition of $12,000, you might discover that with that student comes a bill for special education services of $350,000. And so the decision of the board at that time was not to take that risk.
And without federal reimbursement of the $350,000, without state reimbursement?
Right. So you.
It's a private deal. You're not obligated to educate that student, except by your will. I think so. Whether the money when you think the money might come.
It comes from.
Well, but the declaration of LEA is if there's an outside paying individual, right? They're not connected to an LEA.
I'd want to look into that
Yeah, so
before we
that was the
make an
legal
assumption.
issue.
I think that would be, I mean, to me, that would be a good discussion to be having on the 19th, which is that, you know, getting recalibrated and maybe doing a little research on that issue. And then maybe having Patrick available if he is to speak to the you know, school choice issues and what changing the cap, what the impact would be in the rationale.
And in a way, it does relate back because it might be for some parents that, you know, the idea of paying tuition would be an acceptable outcome. So it is at least arguably connected to the school choice subject.
So there are some options. Cap. There's another option at the high school where big picture may be looked upon differently than the traditional school cap. That may be another option. And as you just said, tuition, private paying tuition option. So,
I mean, as for informing that discussion, can we understand how many people would be in the same situation that we heard about earlier today, and what the financial ramifications of that would be?
yes, in other words, if the board was to allow, what the financial implications would be, is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, if there's only one student who's in this situation, can we accommodate that one student with minimal marginal additional costs. We're not gonna have to hire a new teacher.
What's your
for that.
exposure, would be one.
And I guess the other
Whether
thing is,
it's
can we
right or
even
wrong.
do that? If we're setting the cap, can we say, all right, we're gonna have a cap that's a little bit different, that we're going to essentially grandfather in the younger siblings of kids who are already in.
We'll have to look at the cap too, because I don't know, under the setting of the cap and the timeline, I don't know the revisitation
And I
of the cap.
think we have to think about that, because, I mean, our issue is really the broader one of why we set a cap to begin with, because it's really the fundamental issue of funding following the student.
Correct.
So I do think this is an important, worthwhile discussion. Our 19th agenda is long. Much as I'd love to decide all the issues that ever have to be decided for this district, and that's not going to happen, so maybe it has to slide over to another date.
Well, we've got, I don't know that it's
That
as long
long?
as it looks, because school board interviews is on here twice.
Yeah.
What takes up the most time?
And I guess I would also say, I mean, we should try to do it earlier than later, because if we're gonna change what our cap is,
Yeah,
we
you
would
wanna do it
want
soon?
parents to know
Be able to
that
be
soon.
informed.
Or the
Well-
tuition, or however we're gonna deal with it.
Well, let's put it on, but the question that comes to my mind is, do we need to get some advice about whether, with respect to special ed funding, the money would follow the student in that situation? Now, I think we had advice, and we may be able to dig that up. So we might not have to go out and get new advice, or we might just have to have it updated.
I think we should, because I know some I don't know if it's case law, but when students go to private parochial schools, the
LEA.
the LEA they come from, they have to provide that, and there's some instances where that's provided in a van in the parking lot, so that you're not mixing and matching separation of church and state.
I think the theory under that one is that they're still looking to the LEA for that education.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether there isn't a way to manipulate that to make this work for us.
We can look at it.
So I've developed some policy, I've researched some policies. Essex has a policy that's called acceptance of non-residential students, which by default is this issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes they waive tuition if it's part-time, but sometimes it's more than that, so.
And you can get us that?
I already have it.
Essex has it, yeah. So we can.
Well, get us ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John?
There's two financing issues, the tax note is effective July 1, and the lease for computers and buses. Bids will be there.
The lease for computers and buses. Will the lease for computers be a short issue?
I don't think so, because I think is it a proposed expansion, or that's next year's budget?
Oh, it's stuff that's already in
On the budget, so that might be more
Still be
straightforward.
short, yeah. Okay. All right, I think we've loaded this agenda up enough
Yeah,
now.
that's pretty quick.
That takes us to, we've already covered future agenda items, I think. Minutes of May 20. Are there any corrections or amendments to the May 20 minutes? If not, without objection, they'll be considered approved. That takes us to the consent agenda. In addition to the items that you have, we have a letter of resignation from a social studies teacher at Frederick Middle School, Brian Garahy. Without objection, would the consent agenda be deemed to be amended to include, to add that item? I don't see any objection. Any objection to the consent agenda?
I wanted to just add a comment before
Yeah.
you decide on the consent agenda.
Yes.
Under the new hire report, I just wanted to inform the board, I haven't had a chance necessarily to let everyone know that there's no salaries on this one. Obviously, contracts currently to teachers were issued with no salary. What you do see is step and salary for these individuals, and so I'm wanting to let you know that every one of them have come in under the budgeted amount. I fully expect they will come in under the budgeted amount unless you set teacher negotiations that would be far excessive than what you have now.
So if for some reason they are not under the budget, will it come back to us?
Again, they're, yeah, I suppose I would
Sign
do
a
that.
contract with an individual teacher.
Yeah.
They're gonna be paid in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement.
Right. What I'm wanting to try to do here is that I have not yet set salary. What's been budgeted in some cases where an individual was a 1 year only, they were the budgeted amount. And in other cases, the individual is filling a vacant position of somebody who was more senior. So they're within the budgeted amount. So it's, so for this report, I'm letting you know that they're all within the budgeted amount.
Is there a difference? Usually we have that information, and so is there a different, like, why? I'm just trying to understand.
The difference is that because we're now issuing, we've been in the year in which, I mean, essentially this year is wrapping up, and these individuals are for the next school year, effective beginning July 1. And so with contract, no hard set number, and the way in which we've issued contracts with no salary, I wanted to be consistent in the process and not be committing, the district to, financial conditions that wouldn't be appropriate.
You've identified it as a step on which each one of these teachers will be paid. We just don't know what the salary associated with that step will be.
And I do want to say that, these are 1 year people. In some cases were hired after the deadline. Therefore they became 1 year only. But the intent was essentially to try to get them hired, well before. That timeline, as you know, right now can approach pretty quickly before the contract makes it into a 1 year only. So hiring guidelines, I've been working with the administrators to adhere to the hiring guidelines to the best of our ability. So again, I don't want to take up any more time. I just wanted to make that one point for you on consent agenda.
And one quick observation, I had asked for information on how many of all the 1 year contracts that we signed last year have turned into, not full-time employees, but turning into more permanent employees. Yeah. And I don't think you had that available, David.
No, I don't. I do not, and I can get you that. But on your particular list, it's all but one are returning on this one. But I don't have the whole summation.
But the other thing that I had asked that I thought would be worthwhile really revising maybe our procedures is that I assume the positions were posted and these individuals went through some kind of process, but the flip side is there's no requirement for a performance evaluation.
That's not true. I was short-sighted on that. Someone who's hired, very late to fill a position that gets only a 1 year contract is very different than somebody that would be hiring, let's just say July 16th. We put them on the evaluation process, and so they are evaluated. They're in the first cycle of evaluation under, our collective bargaining agreement. So those are done.
So there would be some performance evaluation data going into this.
Which plays into whether or not they are, are going to be considered.
Yeah, that to me seemed to be a bit of a miss that we'd have a year's experience and no formal process to consider them, which, you hope most of these people make it through, but anyway. Okay, thanks.
Maybe it's just the hour and I'm not getting it, but
You like that money on there before, don't you?
Well, how do we as a board approve a consent agenda and a hire without a salary designated?
The contract
but it's an
will
action.
say
But it's an action item that
you're
we're
gonna be paid in
approving.
accordance with the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, but we still don't know what the salary is.
Well, you can't.
But no, we don't.
But we have to approve the act. We have to approve an action.
You approve hiring somebody under the terms and conditions of the collective bargaining agreement, which will tell us what the payment is going to be. once it's settled. I mean, the only other alternative to that is say, well, we're not gonna hire anybody until the collective bargaining agreement is through, because you can't pay people outside of that collective bargaining.
And the budgeted salary is, I mean, it's, our track record has been, it's been pretty, I mean, it's a good ballpark, and we typically have been under that.
I know, it's just
You know,
different than what's
I did struggle with this,
typical
but
and-
issuing contracts with previous
Right.
year salaries on it, I didn't think was
Right.
in the most advantageous way. And
I'm just
so,
trying to understand.
trying to be consistent with that, I didn't think it would be appropriate, although I know you like it, wouldn't have been appropriate for me to put that amount on there for the new hires, when your current employees would say, well, why didn't I get mine?
So the reason that this didn't happen last year at this time is because we were still within the contract period.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
All right, with that, is there any objection to the consent agenda being approved as has been amended? I don't hear any, it's approved. That takes you to the account payable orders, most of which don't need action, but one of which does need action. Any comments on the other accounts payable besides the Essex Community Education Center? Is there a motion to approve the Essex Community Education Center payment of $67,007.04?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. That takes us to board self-evaluation discussion, it says. But actually, what we're doing is going to do this off this form, right?
Evaluate.
Yep.
Oh, you got it.
Sorry.
Hey, that was cheating.
No, the only way I can do it is to do it as
Really?
being progressive. Because then I forget. All my comments.
Are we doing superintendent and board tonight?
Yes.
Oh, I'm tired.
All right, on the board meeting evaluation, we had all agrees, with the exception of number 1, board members arriving on time, prepared for discussion and actively participating in the meeting. And other than that, no opinion. Other than that was all agrees. On the superintendent feedback from the meeting, we have a couple of disagrees on board questions were first anticipated and second responded to in a thorough, timely manner. And one disagree on data and reports were provided to the board in advance of the meeting in support of its deliberations and required action. And specific information was salary data on the consent agenda was not provided.
I'll amend that and say, or an explanation of why it wasn't provided. Which we did then plan to get.
All right. Are there announcements?
I have, at your place are some announcements for 3 of our schools, although we have a lot more going on at the others as well. But Chamberlain, just identifying some of the activities going on. If any of you would like to be around for those, or certainly welcome to do so. A fair amount of culminating activities, I'll say. I do want to highlight under the middle school the 8th grade final assembly, which will be at the high school gym, and I do want to say that the PA will work. I'm going to say the PA will work, so we'll make sure that that's happening. And again, there's some other just national poster competition, and how our students did was notable with the names of the students, and again, we'll make sure that that gets published. And then remember that on the 14th at 10 o'clock is the high school graduation. And I know Rich, I believe, is working to have a schedule to do a welcome and be seated on the stage.
I am working to clear a scheduled conflict. I expect to be there. If I can't be there, would there be somebody else who would certainly be there?
I'm gonna be there.
I should be there as well.
I'm
gonna try to
go.
I'm gonna try to the graduation, yeah, I wouldn't miss it. That's
So in your absence, if you're not able to do that, is it, Elizabeth's okay to say a few remarks of welcome?
She's the clerk.
Or she so can delegate at this moment to somebody else? Remember that it's a fairly, it's a timely ceremony. I also want you to note that the elementary schools will also be watching, and when in each of the 3 elementaries in the middle school, it will be aired live through RETN, and I have an expectation that all teachers will be participating or watching and witnessing, that activity of culmination.
So, in fact, other people can watch that from home.
Well,
Because
that's a good thing to
RETN
note to the public.
It's an RETN link that will be on our website. It's live web stream, so you just click on the icon. And I don't know yet what that looks like, but you can watch graduation at home.
So if there's people that that can't make it, whether they have relatives or not, but they'd like to watch the ceremony, and it's available. It will be available, and you'll have the link off of our website. So that's all I have.
Any other announcements? With that, a motion to adjourn would be appropriate.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 9:50.